The lighthouse keeper's secret. The wind howled like a grieving widow, rattling the windows of the old lighthouse where Amos Carter had lived alone for the past decade. At 67, his hands were calloused, his face weathered like the cliffs that cradled his solitary home on the edge of Port Harrow, a forgotten fishing village on Maine's rugged coast. The sea was his only companion now, its endless churn a reminder of the daughter he'd lost 20 years ago to a runaway's dream and a man who'd promised her the world. Amos had stopped believing in promises after that. On this stormy October night, the ocean roared louder than usual, waves crashing against the rocks below like fists against a door. Amos sat by the fire, sipping black coffee, the radio crackling with static and the voice of a weatherman warning of gale-force winds. He was about to turn it off when something caught his eye through the fogged-up window, a faint light bobbing out at sea, where no boat should be. He squinted, his heart quickening. A distress signal? A lost fisherman? Or just his tired eyes playing tricks? Grabbing his oilskin coat and lantern, Amos trudged out into the storm. The wind tore at him, salty spray stinging his face as he descended the slick stone path to the shore. His rowboat, tethered to a crumbling dock, rocked violently. He hesitated. His knees weren't what they used to be, and the sea was a beast tonight, but that light flickered again, insistent, pulling him like a moth. He untied the boat, climbed in, and rowed toward the signal, the oars groaning against the current. The light led him to a small skiff, abandoned and drifting, its hull battered by the waves. No crew, no captain, just a ghost of a boat. Amos tied his rowboat to it and climbed aboard, his boots slipping on the wet deck. In the center of the skiff, lashed to a bench with frayed rope, was a wooden chest, its edges splintered, its lock rusted but intact. It was heavy, too heavy for luggage. His gut twisted. Something about this felt wrong. The wind screamed, but beneath it, Amos heard something else, a faint, muffled whimper from inside the chest. His breath caught. No, he muttered, shaking his head. Can't be. But the sound came again, weak, desperate. His hands, trembling not from the cold but from dread, fumbled with the lock. It was stuck, rusted shut. He grabbed a crowbar from his boat, wedged it under the lid, and pried with all his strength. The wood splintered, the lock gave way, and the lid flew open. Inside, curled in a soaked blanket, was a toddler, no older than 2, her tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Her lips were blue, her cheeks pale as moonlight, but her eyes fluttered open, meeting his with a silent plea. Clutched in her small fist was a silver locket, its chain tangled around her fingers. Amos's heart stopped. He knew that locket. He'd given it to his daughter, Lila, when she was 16, the year before she ran away with that no-good drifter, Caleb. The locket held a photo of Amos and Lila, smiling on the dock, a memory from a life that no longer existed. Please, God, Amos whispered, lifting the child with a tenderness he thought he'd forgotten. She was cold, so cold, her body limp against his chest. He wrapped her in his coat, rowed back to shore faster than his old bones should have allowed, and carried her up to the lighthouse. The storm raged on, but all he could hear was the faint rasp of her breathing inside. He laid her on the couch by the fire, piling blankets over her tiny frame. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing steadier but still weak. He fumbled with the locket, his fingers shaking as he opened it. There it was, the photo of him and Lila, faded but unmistakable. On the other side, a newer photo, a young woman with Lila's eyes, holding the toddler. His granddaughter? His chest ached with a hope he didn't dare trust. He called 911, his voice cracking as he explained what he'd found. A child, in a chest, out at sea. She's alive, but barely. Hurry! The operator promised an ambulance, but Port Harrow was remote, and the storm would slow them down. Amos hung up and sat beside the girl, stroking her damp hair. "Hold on, little one," he whispered. "You're safe now." As he waited, he studied the locket again. Lila had been gone for 20 years, her last letter arriving a decade ago, postmarked from Boston, saying she was happy with Caleb but offering no address. Amos had written back, begging her to come home, but the letter was returned, undeliverable. He'd assumed she was lost forever, dead, or worse. But this locket, this child, could Lila still be out there? And why was her daughter locked in a chest, abandoned in a storm? The ambulance arrived an hour later, red lights cutting through the fog. 2 paramedics, a wiry man named Tom and a young woman, Sarah, rushed in. Sarah checked the girl's pulse, her face grim. "Hyperthermia, possible dehydration," as she said, wrapping the child in a thermal blanket. "We need to move fast." Tom looked at Amos. "You coming?" Amos nodded, grabbing the locket and following them into the ambulance. The ride to the hospital in Ellsworth was a blur of sirens and medical jargon. Sarah worked on the girl, attaching monitors, while Tom asked questions. "You know who she is?" "No," Amos lied, clutching the locket. He couldn't say it yet, couldn't voice the hope that this was Lila's daughter. Not until he knew more. At the hospital, the toddler was whisked to the pediatric ICU. A nurse, Ellen, led Amos to a waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and despair. "The police will want to talk to you," as she said gently. "Finding a child like that, it's serious." Amos nodded, his mind racing. He opened the locket again, staring at the photo of the young woman. It had to be Lila. But where was she? And who would do this to a child? Could they have taken Lila? Amos asked, his voice hoarse. "It's possible," Amara said. "If she crossed them, or if she was involved, we're looking into it." Amos refused to believe Lila was involved with criminals. She'd been reckless, sure, running off with Caleb, but she wasn't a smuggler. Still, doubt gnawed at him. What if Caleb had pulled her into something dark? What if Ivy was a pawn in their game? On the 5th day, Ivy was moved to a regular room, her cheeks pinker, her eyes brighter. Amos was reading her a book about whales when Mara burst in, her face tense. "We got a lead." A fisherman saw a woman matching Lila's description at a dock in Cutler, 2 days before you found Ivy. She was arguing with a man, tall, scarred face, goes by Rook. Is a known figure in the smuggling ring. Amos's blood ran cold. Caleb had a scar on his face, he said. From a bar fight, Lila wrote about it once. Mara nodded. "We're raiding a warehouse in Cutler tonight. It's a risk, but if Lila's there, we'll find her. I need you to stay here, Amos." For Ivy. He wanted to argue, to demand to go with them, but Ivy's small hand gripped his finger. He nodded. "Find my daughter, Mara. Please." That night, Amos stayed by Ivy's side, the hospital clock ticking too slowly. He prayed, something he hadn't done since Lila left. At 3 a.m., his phone rang. It was Mara. "We found her," as she said, her voice strained. "Lila's alive, but it's complicated. Get to the precinct in Cutler. Now." Amos left Ivy with Ellen, promising to be back soon, and drove through the pre-dawn fog to Cutler. At the precinct, Mara met him in a sterile interrogation room. Lila sat there, older, thinner, her eyes haunted but unmistakably hers. Dad, as she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Amos crossed the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms. Lila, oh God, Lila. They held each other, sobbing, until Mara cleared her throat. Lila's been through hell, Amara said. She got mixed up with Caleb, who was running drugs for Rook's crew. When she got pregnant with Ivy, she wanted out, but Caleb wouldn't let her. He locked her in a safe house, used Ivy as leverage to keep her compliant. 2 days ago, Lila escaped, stole a boat, and tried to get Ivy to safety. But Rook caught up with her, took Ivy, and locked her in that chest to send a message. Amos's fists clenched. Where's Caleb now? Dead, Amara said flatly. Shot during the raid. Rook's in custody, singing like a bird to cut a deal. Lila's not facing charges. She was a victim, coerced. But she's in bad shape, Amos. Physically, emotionally. She'll need you. Lila looked at him, her eyes broken. I'm so sorry, Dad. I thought I could protect Ivy, but I failed her. You didn't fail, Amos said fiercely. She's alive because of you. She's safe now. The weeks that followed were a blur of healing. Lila moved into the lighthouse with Amos, sleeping in her old room. Ivy came home from the hospital, her laughter filling the once quiet space. Social workers visited, ensuring Lila was stable enough to care for Ivy, but Amos was there every step, cooking meals, telling stories, rebuilding the family he thought he'd lost. One evening, as the sun set over the sea, Amos sat on the porch with Lila and Ivy. Ivy played with the locket, now cleaned and polished, giggling as Lila tickled her. I thought I'd never see you again, Amos said, his voice thick. Lila took his hand. You saved us both, Dad. You didn't give up. Amos looked out at the sea, calm now, the storm long gone. I just followed the light, he said. And in his heart, he knew it was true, the light that led him to Ivy, to Lila, to a second chance at family.